Picture this. It's late afternoon in Brighton, England, 1871. The kind of day where the air smells faintly of salt and sugar, and the shops along the street are just starting to glow in the fading light. You've been offered a small box of chocolate creams. They're elegant, hand-dipped, wrapped in paper, the sort of gift meant to signal thoughtfulness. Friends are exchanging them. Neighbors are sending them by post. Chocolates have become the polite way to say, "I thought of you." You eat one without hesitation. At first, it tastes exactly as expected. Sweet, soft, and comforting. Then your jaw tightens. Your muscles begin to spasm as if every nerve in your body has been switched on at once. Your back arches. Your breathing turns sharp and shallow. You're fully conscious, painfully so, as your body betrays you. Someone screams for a doctor, but the doctor won't help because this isn't an illness and it isn't happening in just one home. Across Brighton, people are collapsing after eating chocolates and nobody knows why. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of True Crime Culinary. A little bit about me. I had a fun weekend hanging with friends, seeing comedy shows involving songs about the Grinch and Martha May Whovier. I can't stop saying that name. And a quick trip to Bodega Bay. There, on a lovely walk, I watched my dog rolling dead things on the beach whilst I looked for sea glass. And then later that evening, Après Beach, I had a chocolate caramel truffle, and it sparked my curiosity for this week's milestone episode. That's right, double digits, episode 10. Hey, before we dive in, remember to rate and review the pod. It really helps me make the best content possible for people like you and me. We, who love bite-sized episodes of true crime and a medium dive into food-based factoids. Speaking of true crime, let's find out who got crazy with the chocolates. Her name was Christiana Edmunds. She was 40 years old, intelligent, articulate, well-dressed, the last person anyone expected to be at the center of a murder investigation. She moved easily among polite society, she wrote letters, she hosted teas, she blended in perfectly. But beneath that calm exterior was an obsession. As a widow herself, Christiana had fallen deeply, irrationally in love with Dr. Charles Beard, a married physician. When it became clear that he could never leave his wife, Christiana didn't turn her anger toward him. She turned it outward. First, towards Emily Beard, his wife. Christiana gifted her a box of chocolates. Emily ate one and immediately became violently ill. Then Christiana turned her obsessions toward the town itself. Christiana began buying chocolates from a local confectioner, taking them home and injecting them with strychnine, a fast-acting poison commonly sold at the time as rat poison. She carefully resealed the chocolates and returned them to the shop, claiming they weren't fresh enough. And then the shop resold them. People across Brighton fell ill, some survived, some didn't, and when suspicion began to narrow, Christiana tried to scatter it further, mailing poisoned chocolates to random residents, even sending them to people who had nothing to do with the shop, including, eventually, herself and the shop owner himself. Her thinking was simple and chilling. If everyone is a potential victim, then no one can be considered a target. She was finally caught not through brilliance, but through pattern, witnesses, chemistry reports, chemists who remembered selling her large amounts of strychnine. Yes, that's a hint. And Dr. Beard finally admitting that he had suspected all along. At trial, the court concluded that Christiana Edmunds was guilty, but insane. She was diagnosed as hysterical, and her mother testified that their family had experienced issues with mental health. She was committed to Broadmoor Asylum, where she would live for the rest of her life. But by then, the damage was done. Chocolate, sweet, comforting, and ordinary, had become a weapon. And this is where history steps in, because you might be thinking, hey, wait a second. How did the chocolate shop even get to 19th century England when cacao is from a totally different continent? Because chocolate did not begin life as a dainty Victorian sweet. It began thousands of years earlier, deep in Central and South America, where cacao trees grew naturally in the Amazon basin and then spread north into Mesoamerica. There, the Maya and Aztec prepared cacao as a bitter, spiced drink. Thick, frothy, energizing, and nothing at all like the neat little chocolates in English shop windows. To the Maya, cacao was sacred. To the Aztec, it was imperial. It was ceremonial, traded, taxed, and even used as currency. You could literally buy a turkey with a few handfuls of cacao beans. Priests drank it during rituals, rulers consumed it as a privilege of rank, and soldiers carried cacao because it was believed to be medicinal, strengthening, and stimulating, a source of energy long before caffeine culture existed. Chocolate was thought to uplift the spirit, open the heart, cure fatigue, and even act as an aphrodisiac. To the indigenous peoples of the region, the Olmec, Maya, and Aztec, cacao wasn't candy, it was cosmology, a gift from the gods, tied to creation stories, funerary rituals, healing ceremonies, marriage contracts, and political diplomacy. Cacao beans functioned as currency. To drink cacao was an act of status and spirituality. And the drink itself, very different than what we're used to today. It was thick, bitter, fragrant with spices, poured from vessel to vessel to create a mousse-like froth. Nothing at all like the glossy chocolates sitting in English shop windows. And then came the 1500s. When Europeans encountered cacao, they didn't just taste it, they took it. Raw beans crossed the Atlantic on the very same colonial trade routes as sugar, rum, coffee, spices, and enslaved people. Sweetening cacao required massive amounts of sugar, and sugar production in the Caribbean and Brazil depended almost entirely on enslaved African labor. Without indigenous cultivation knowledge, and without the brutal system of plantation slavery, Europe would not have had enough cacao or sugar to turn chocolate into a profitable commodity. So by the 1700s and 1800s, chocolate had become a luxury item for Europe's elite. Chocolate houses appeared in London, Paris, and Madrid, rowdy, caffeine-fueled hubs where politics met gossip, much like early coffee houses. But chocolate was still mostly consumed as a drink, whisked into hot water and thickened with spices or sweeteners. It was expensive, inconsistent, and unstable, a delicacy, not yet a daily treat. But then came industrialization. Steam-powered grinders made cacao easier to process. Sugar became cheaper. Mills standardized particle size. And suddenly, chocolate wasn't just exotic, it was scalable. Europeans could turn a sacred indigenous beverage into something that could be molded, shipped, and sold. And this is where Switzerland enters the chat. Switzerland never grew cacao. Famously, it's very cold there. Their alpine climate made it impossible to grow cacao. But they became masters of process, the meticulous engineers of edible pleasures. Milk had always been too expensive to mix into chocolate reliably until the arrival of powdered and condensed milk, which kept better and cost less. Swiss chocolatiers began blending cacao with milk, softening its bitterness and creating the sweet, creamy flavor profile that would define Swiss chocolate. Then, in the late 19th century, a cluster of Swiss innovators, today considered the 5 architects of modern chocolate, changed everything. Be ready for me to slaughter these names. Enjoy. Number 1, François-Louis Cailler, unclear, opened one of the earliest mechanized chocolate factories in Switzerland, making chocolate more affordable and consistent. Number 2 is Philippe Zuchard, probably Zuchard, perfected smooth grinding techniques, reducing grittiness and improving texture at scale. Number 3, the simplest name of them all, Daniel Peter, but I suspect it's Daniel Peter or something like that fun. Created the first successful milk chocolate bar by mixing chocolate with condensed milk, a breakthrough that transformed global taste preferences. Number 4, you'll recognize this name, Henri Nestlé, or Henry Nestlé, unclear, whose invention of shelf-stable condensed milk made Peter's milk chocolate possible and paved the way for mass-market dairy-based chocolate. Number 5, again a fun one, Rodolphe Lindt, should be familiar. Invented the conch, a slow, heated mixing process that made chocolate silky, glossy, stable, and melt in your mouth smooth. I read somewhere that it took him 20 years to perfect this process. These 5 men didn't just change chocolate, they reinvented it, turning a gritty ritual drink into a refined, stable, sweet, shareable solid. And they didn't guard their secrets. Their techniques diffused throughout Europe, standardizing texture and quality, lowering costs, and expanding exports. Their innovations helped Switzerland become the chocolate capital of Europe despite never growing a single cacao pod. Their innovations helped Switzerland become the chocolate capital of Europe despite never growing a single cacao pod. Swiss mastery was technical, not agricultural, a triumph of process over geography. So by the time Christiana Edmunds was poisoning chocolates in England, chocolate had already traveled from sacred drink to colonial commodity to industrial product to domestic treat. And that transformation, built on indigenous knowledge, colonial extraction, and Swiss engineering, made chocolate ubiquitous. It was affordable, it was trusted, and that's what makes Christiana Edmunds' story so chilling. She didn't just poison sweets, she cracked something psychological. The idea that danger could be hidden inside comfort, tradition, and pleasure. And long before her chocolates were gone, that fear lingered. Because once you learn that even chocolate can kill, you never quite unwrap a treat the same way again. Thanks for listening to this week's True Crime Culinary. Remember to subscribe, rate, review. Hey, whatever brings joy to your heart, it would bring so much joy to mine. I can't wait to see you next week. And remember, be careful what's in your cup.